She had a dark secret. The city sang her name from banners and billboards. Photographers learned the angle that softened her jaw. Editors argued over which gown would make the cover. Her laughter lived in marble lobbies and champagne bubbles, a practiced currency that paid for invitations and smiles. Everyone knew Celeste Maro. The arc of her cheek, the steadiness of her hand on charity envelopes, the slight hesitation before each posed smile. Nobody knew what ached behind it. At night, she walked a corridor no one else could see. It began in the same place each time. A narrow passage lit by an amber lamp that smelled faintly of old paper and dust. Her heels clicked in measured rhythm on stone that did not belong to any building she remembered. Mirrors leaned against the walls like patient witnesses, reflecting not what she wore but what she had shed. The corridor had thresholds, doors she never reached in waking life but which left her breathless, as if some small, private thing had been left unclaimed in a locked room. Sometimes she thought she woke from the dream with a name on her tongue, and then spent the day trying to find it without success. That was the secret. The ache was constant, a hunger disguised as nostalgia, an absence she had learned to conceal beneath silk and applause. If you love stories that haunt, subscribe. There are others like this waiting. The first time she noticed him properly, the room was a glass bowl of light. It was a gala organized to save old stone, an ironic title on the program, as though saving monumentality could cure the thinness people felt inside. Celeste moved through applause the way one moves through water, buoyant, practiced, avoiding depth. He was there in a corner that had not been set aside for photography, a small human silhouette against a tapestry of wealth and candelabra. He was out of place in the way that matters most, not wrong in attire, but wrong in intention, as if he belonged to the architecture of the building, rather than to the social event. When he looked at her, something in her chest answered. His eyes did not catalogue. They knew. The recognition was a precise thing. Not flattery, not fascination, but the terrible relief of a door opening after a long blind search. He did not approach with the polite calculus of the room. He stepped forward when the crowd had folded its applause into conversation and said simply, "You walk at night." Celeste laughed, because laughter was what she did when she didn't know what else to do. "Everyone sleeps," she said. "Some of us just have a better bed." "You do not sleep," he corrected. "You traverse." He spoke as if counting something older than the gala, syllables that slid past fashion and fame. His voice had a hush like the space beneath a bell. He smelled faintly of varnish and rain. There was nothing in his manner that announced menace. Instead, there was the steadiness of someone who has been waiting on thresholds for far too long to be surprised. She imagined the exchange would end with a distracted compliment and a return to hors d'oeuvres. It did not. He asked about the corridor and waited for her to say something she had never said aloud. The question carved into her like a small, clean wound. "Do you remember the door?" She wanted to tell him she had nothing to remember beyond a curated set of photographs, and the names people liked to attach to her. She wanted to say that the corridor was a private failing, a habit of the mind, a nocturnal improvisation. Instead, she said, "I dream of a light." He inclined his head as though that were sufficient answer. Then he left, as quiet as he had arrived, dissolving into the crowd until she could no longer find him by sight. But the feeling of being seen settled on her like a garment that fit at last. It clung. The dreams grew warmer afterward. The lamp in the corridor burned with an amber that tasted like nostalgia itself. Doors appeared, then closed, then opened a crack to reveal limbed interiors. A small room lined with old photographs, a staircase that wound into the throat of a house, a window that looked out on impossible weather. In waking hours things shifted in small, precise ways. Glass lingered where it should not. Reflections hesitated an extra heartbeat. Elevators would stall between floors and plunge her into a hollow, private silence. Names slid from her memory like coins from a shallow pocket. Her calendar remained full, her public face intact, and yet she arrived at meetings carrying a faint exhaustion, as if she had been awake all night in another economy of time. She began to look for explanations with the same compulsive tenderness she brought to her image. Libraries became sanctuaries without gossip. She opened brittle volumes whose margins were crowded with the notes of readers who had long since been absorbed into dust. In a footnote she found a rumor. A being who waited at thresholds, who recognized the unnameable longing and could either nourish it into a kind of whole or consume it until nothing remained. In an old newspaper clipping, someone had written a line that caught in her throat. They call it a keeper of doors. It remembers those who cannot remember themselves. The language of the text was slippery, as though the writers had been unwilling to say too much. That was, she decided, the pattern she wanted. If the world required neat definitions, scientific names, diagnoses, lists, memory could be burned to ash by words that shaped it too closely. Better that the thing remain an outline, a hunger she could choose to meet. She arranged a meeting in the one place left to her that felt uninhabited by her role. An abandoned theater on the edge of the city. The red velvet on the seats had powdered to rust. A few roped-off boxes looked like sleeping creatures. The air had the dense quality of a place that still remembered applause. He arrived as if summoned by the architecture itself. He didn't sit. He simply unfolded where the light pooled, and his shadow did not obey the same rules as other shadows. It uncoupled and reached toward the velvet, touching it with a curious, patient hunger. "What are you?" she asked before she could structure the exchange any other way. It was a poor question for an answer that would not be a classifiable thing. He smiled in a way that was taught rather than spontaneous. "I am a watcher of doors," he said. "I notice when someone has been knocking at one for too long." "You noticed me," she said. "You kept knocking until your knuckles grew calloused," he said. I could not see. He did not claim to be a benefactor. He did not offer bargains in loud fonts. Instead, his speech was small, precise. "You may step through, or you may keep the world you have made, beautiful, thin, persistent." He seemed to weigh the words like a coin on his tongue. "There will be a shape to what you become. It will not be what you expect. You may forget much that you plan to keep." Celeste thought of her collections, the shoes with narrow heels that punctured marble, the dresses that hung like armor, the friends who were excellent at reflecting the right light. She thought of the private things she could not show, of evenings when her voice hollowed into a script rehearsed before a mirror. She imagined a life without the sting of wanting to be someone who existed. She imagined a body that did not need to perform to be held by another kind of attention. "Whole," she said, testing the word like a coin in her mouth. "You mean I would stop wanting?" "It is not the stopping of wanting," he corrected. "It is the altering of the want. You will not ache with absence. You will have a different hunger. The price is memory and measure." She accused him of being a thief by another name. He answered simply, "I offer a trade. Some accept, some refuse. Both leave marks." Their encounters multiplied like a rumor. The theater, the balcony of her penthouse at night where the city lay like embers, and one winter evening by the river where fog made the buildings uncertain. Each time the presence, if that was the word, was slightly different, sometimes more shadow than shape, sometimes startlingly close to human in the slope of his shoulders. In one meeting, she reached out as if to touch the seam between his coat and whatever lay beyond, and felt something that might have been warmth and might have been absence. He did not flinch. He said afterward, "People think being known is the same as belonging. They are different." Her life narrowed. Invitations continued. People asked the same questions at the same volume, unaware that beneath the gloss she felt names sliding like foreign coins. An old friend called and used words of concern. Celeste smiled and told stories she had told before because they were safer than true answers. Photographs of her continued to sell. She learned to stage a look that suggested intimacy without risking content. One night, the corridor stopped being a corridor and became a chamber. The walls were lined with small, framed memories. Faces perhaps hers, perhaps others, all captured in the amber light. The echoes in that chamber were not voices so much as impressions. The feeling of being kissed by rain. The memory of a song whose words she could not remember. The smell of a kitchen where no one lived now. The present stood by the far door and, for the first time, the choice was staged clearly beneath a single lamp. "You will come," he said. "And if I refuse?" she asked. "You will return to a life where you are excellent at being seen. You will carry a hollowness like a secret ornament. You will age as you always planned. You will remember the price you did not pay." She thought of the years ahead, awards, dinners, the slow accruing of portraits that sit beneath glass and collect dust. She thought of nights in which the corridor would keep opening and closing like a book she could not finish. She thought of the way the presence's recognition unclenched something in her sternum, as if he had slid a hand under the ribs where the persistent hollow lived. "You will lose names," he said. "You will forget how to call what once was yours, but the ache will not be your companion. Instead, something else will keep you, and you will not be lonely the way you have become." Words swelled and thinned in her like the tide. She looked at him and for a moment had the impossible sensation of being both incredibly small and infinitely vast. She thought of authenticity and whether its price was too dear, whether wholeness could be bartered for the forfeiture of her own carefully assembled life. She stepped forward. There is no theatrical violence in her leaving. The day after she vanished, the city found the blank evidence of an intact life. Her penthouse tidy, the balcony door open to the wind, a single shoe left by the sofa as if its owner had gone to fetch something and not returned. Cameras and reporters coined half-meanings. Soft columns mourned a public life suspended. Theories bloomed in corners of the internet and in whispered conservations beneath gallery lights. But in the wake of conjecture, there was a less explainable thing. An amber glow that waited between buildings on clear nights. A slice of light that drew the eye and refused to be explained away as street lamp or reflection. People who had loved her public face wrote essays about the fragility of fame. Friends posted portraits with captions that suggested unending grief. Some speculated she had run away, others that she had had a breakdown. A few said nothing, as if words would scrape the wound open again. The corridor became rumor. Children dared each other to stand beneath the amber light and count to 10. In an old bookstore, a scholar of marginal things found a scrap of paper where Celeste had once scribbled a line while researching. "To be known is not to be taken." Nobody could say whether that had been a note to herself or an instruction left for someone else. The presence did not step into interviews or perform confession. He was a rumor then, which is all thresholds ever are. If you wandered, on a night when the city has forgotten its own breath, into the seam between buildings and traced the amber, if you leaned your cheek against the cold stone and closed your eyes, you might feel a hand at the edge of your vision. It would not be a human hand. It would be the sensation of recognition, the removal of a small burden. Some who pressed forward swore they lost everything they meant to keep, and gained a kind of complacent plenitude. Others returned with names missing from their mouths and eyes that no longer startled at close affection. Some never returned at all. Celeste became, as such absences often do, an image that belonged to the city as much as any statue. People told the story differently, always the same beats. The woman who shone and the door she walked through. The truth, if there is a thing called truth, is quieter. She chose a different shape of being, and in doing so unraveled the string of a self that had been carefully woven from other people's expectations. He was not human. That was certain in the way his presence dissolved categories. She had kept a secret that was not shameful so much as unfillable, and when offered a way to be filled, she accepted the cost. At night, when the parties have cooled and the cameras have rolled away, the amber light between buildings folds itself into the city as a rumor of possibility. Lovers walk home and find their hands clasped tighter without remembering why. A woman who has worn 1,000 faces will sometimes stop on a balcony and trace a line of memory she cannot name. The motifs linger. The corridor, the lamp, the echoes of heels on stone. They stitch themselves into urban legend because the city needs small mysteries to remind it that not everything can be staged or scheduled. If this story lingered with you, like and share it with someone who walks between light and shadow.